Andy Callan, we meet again.
Hi.
Across the Wargames table. This time, battling it out in the English Civil War using this new set of rules called Never Mind the Matchlocks. Now, Never Mind the Matchlocks is free with the November issue of Wargames Illustrated. It comes inside. And it's been written by you.
It has.
It's the latest in the Never Mind the ... series.
Yes.
So we've done Never Mind the Bill hooks, we've done Never Mind the boat hooks, and we've done Fantasia as well.
Never Mind the Warlocks.
Never Mind the Warlocks, which is Fantasia, yeah. So now we're moving forward in time. We're into the English Civil War or thereabouts.
Yeah, thereabouts.
Right. The first question I'm going to ask is the one that we get asked more than any other, which is, how do I need to base my figures?
You base them however you like. I've got mine in, for example, infantry battalion of 24, 8 pikes, 16 musketeers, and the cavalry squadrons of 8. But if you've got them set up in any other way or for any other scale, just treat it as 24 strength points or 8 strength points, and use some little dice or other mechanism to show the casualties you've taken.
Yeah, so with bill hooks, we often put things on movement trays. We often take figures off individually, but you don't have to do that. No. A lot of people's English Civil War collections won't be based like that, so that's absolutely fine. You can get through with anything.
Yes, in my infantry are in 4s, for example, so I just keep a dice by the side. One of these little dice, for example. So that's Black for Dead, so he's lost 2 out of that sleeve there. Very good. Okay, so that addresses that point, although we'll be asked another 100 times. Yep.
Another main point we need to underline is this is a completely standalone set of rules, so you don't need Never Mind the Bill hooks to play it at all. Everything is in this 32-page publication. Right, so why into the English Civil War? Why into the pike and shot period? Does it work particularly well?
Well, I wasn't planning to originally, and then about 18 months ago, a chap called Pat Stoddart on the Never Mind the Bill hooks page said, why don't we do an English Civil War version? And initially I thought, well, no, not really, because it's a bit later and it's not the same as heroic leadership with medieval type arms. But then the more I thought about it, I thought, well, it's fought over the same ground. Mm-hmm. And the level I want to pitch it at is the smaller battles or the big skirmishes. What I originally pitched bill hooks at, for example, but since then people have used it to refight Towton and things. But ideally about 150 figures or so aside is what I'm pitching it at. Yeah. But I'm sure somebody will make it bigger. This sort of game you can play through in an hour and a half, 2 hours. And so the more I thought about it, because these little battles don't seem to show anything of any particular inspired grand tactical leadership. They're all a bit scrappy affairs, a bit like the way that bill hooks works. So I thought, well, okay, why not? And then thought about it a little more. Then Nigel Davies said, why don't you call it Never Mind the Matchlocks? I thought, well, yes, that's the way to go, isn't it? Mm. And then the final thing that did it was I went to the BritCon show in Nottingham in August of 2023, and I picked up a very nice, ready-painted English Civil War setup. So there was really no stopping me then. Mm. And I went away, and over the winter, played it through and worked it through with my local group, and the rule set is the result. And it works very well, I think, and the local group thinks so. And I put it out to the wider Bill Hooks Facebook membership, and I got a lot of nice feedback there. And the result is what you see before you now. It's a game that will be very, very familiar to players experienced in Bill Hooks, but to somebody who isn't, like Bill Hooks, it's a very simple set of rules using tried and tested mechanisms. There's dice to hit, dice to save, there's a card generated turn sequence. There's a couple of new things in there just to reflect the differences in the period. There's something called the doctrine dice, which perhaps talk about later. And obviously the certain aspects are different, but basically the core mechanisms are very similar to what you'd be used to from Never Mind the Billhooks.
Okay, so let's talk about the doctrine dice now, because that
Yeah.
is a particularly interesting development, actually. This kicks in if you're wanting to make a charge against another unit.
Yeah. So this has its roots in a set of English civil rules I wrote almost 50 years ago. The idea is that at the start, particularly at the start of the English Civil War, battlefield tactics were in a state of flux. There were the adherents of the Dutch system, which involved fairly stately firing at each other, and there was those who went for the Swedish system, which was much more get stuck in with the cold steel. That's a gross simplification, but that's what all war games are. They're gross simplifications. That's what it boils down to. So whenever you get two units moving into contact with each other, be it infantry versus infantry, cavalry versus cavalry, or any combination of the two, each side rolls a doctrine dice. And because if we'd left it to individual wargamers, they would always choose the best tactics. So, for example, in a cavalry versus cavalry fight, there's 3 different ways of doing it. You can get charged straight in with the cold steel, which is a sort of Swedish stroke Rupert type thing. There's advance quite deliberately and at a trot and shoot your pistols as you go in and then get stuck in, which is more the sort of Cromwellian Ironside approach. And there's the faff about with your pistols and just try and do all the damage with that, which is the early war Dutch style thing. So generally speaking, a low roll will make you do the pistol thing, and a high roll will enable you to do the madcap charge. Now, there are drawbacks to the madcap charge. It's very effective. Like in billhooks, you charge in, you hit for 4, 5, 6, and you re-roll all your misses. So it's very good. On the other hand, if you win the fight, because you're so fired up, you just go disappearing off into the distance, which may well take you off the table, as happened quite a lot in the real thing. So there are pros and cons. And because it's not in the hands of you as the wargamer, you've got no control over it, apart from whatever control Lady Luck gives you with the dice roll.
Okay, right. And of course, we don't shy away from the fact that matchlocks like billhooks does involve a lot of luck, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely, yes.
As you say, it's not about grand tactics.
No.
It's very much about smaller battles and fun games.
Yes, and so much is determined not just by the dice, but also by the order in which the command cards come up. You know, you could be on the brink of an absolute breakthrough if your card comes up first, and at that point you can almost guarantee that it will not come up first.
Yeah.
But dice are all down to it, and as I use a quote from Sir William Waller, who said, following his experiences in the Civil War, the dice being nowhere so uncertain as in the field. So he was well aware of the vagaries of fortune on the battlefield.
Good, and we're taking his lead. Yeah.
We are.
Let's just talk a little bit about the troop types that we've got in the game, because people will be interested to hear that, which of course are detailed in the rules.
Yep.
So what are we throwing in here?
We've got the standard infantry formation, which is the battalion, which is a mixture of pike and muskets. You usually have a central block of pikes with a sleeve of muskets on each side. That's the standard thing. By the 1630s, that was pretty common across Europe. The big tercios and the Swedish brigades had more or less disappeared. So that's what everybody was doing. So that's the infantry. That's the standard one. Now, the option is there to have detached or commanded musketeers. So they operate away from the pikes in units of 12. This was particularly used in close country. That used to leave the pikeman as a bit of a rump standing behind and not really having much to do. But occasionally, as at battles like Stratton and Lansdowne and Adwalton Moor, they waited until the musketeers had virtually used up all their ammunition and then came in. And that could be quite effective. But generally, the standard thing is to have the pikes and muskets mixed together. Like in billhooks, you have skirmishers. So these would be the musketeers. There can be as a forlorn hope, so-called, which describes their likely fate on the battlefield. And they operate in sixes, like in billhooks. You've got the dragoons, Again, they operate as a sort of skirmisher, and they're in companies of 8. So they're either mounted or they dismount to shoot, in which case we always count one of them as being a horse holder, so they fire with 7. So those are your 3 basic infantry types. I mean, later on in a subsequent article, I think in a later edition of the magazine, we'll be introducing some rules for the Celtic fringe. So you will have rules for Montroses, Scots, and for Highlanders as well, but we won't talk about them there. That was add a bit of complication. As far as the cavalry go, cavalry operate in squadrons of 8, like in billhooks, and the typical cavalry of the day were the so-called harquebusiers. Now, you would think this means they were equipped with a harquebus. Well, some of them were, but most of them weren't. It's a slightly archaic term. But in that 8-man squadron, you can either have them in a single line. Now, if you do your health leather charge in a single line, that is particularly effective because you're going to get a lot of figures in. But it means you're a bit less manoeuvrable. More common was a slightly deeper formation like that, and that's more the sort of Cromwellian Ironside sort of thing. But those are your bog standard cavalry. Then, of course, even though there were hardly any of them in the Civil War, there was one known regiment and perhaps a squadron of Essex's Life Guard. There are the cuirassiers. They are the descendants of the medieval knight, fully armoured and reputedly pistol-proof. Sir Arthur Heselridge at Roundway Down sustained about half a dozen pistol shots, and the king said had he but been fed and watered he could have withstood a siege. It was one of his rare jokes. Anyway, so we do have rules for cuirassiers again, but they will always operate in this slightly deeper formation because they like using their pistols.
With a good saving throw.
With a very good saving throw indeed. Yeah. Then the last type of cavalry are these boys, and they are the skirmisher cavalry. You'll find in reading closely some of the eyewitness accounts that skirmishers mounted troops sometimes went in for something called piqueering, which is sometimes probably the origin of our word bickering, which was a sort of skirmishing on horseback. They used to ride up and discharge their pistols, or if they had any longer weapons, they'd use those. And it was more to try and encourage the enemy to counterattack and do something stupid. But that is allowed for. We have skirmisher cavalry in detachments of 4. So they're not going to be very effective, but they can be a bit of a nuisance. So that's the mounted troops. We've already talked about the dragoons. The artillery, we've got 2 types. We have the field guns, which I define as anything, a Saker or anything bigger, sort of 6-pounder upwards. And once you set them up on the battlefield, they're immobile. They can't be moved. On the other hand, we have these little guns, light guns, which were small enough to be manhandled with the infantry, and you could push them along. They haven't got as long a range, they're not as effective, but they can add to an infantry brigade's firepower. So those are the individual unit types. When it comes to their bigger formations, both cavalry and infantry are organised in brigades. Now, a brigade is usually between 2 and 4 units, so 2 to 4 infantry battalion or 2 to 4 squadrons of cavalry. Each would be commanded by an individual brigadier. The army commander, on the other hand, doesn't really have much to do once the battle's out. His job was to get the army to the battlefield in one piece and then line it up in his preferred formation, and then he used to pretty well leave it to the brigadiers to fight the fight as they can. Unlike in billhooks, leaders don't attach themselves to a fight except for cavalry fights. So you can lead a cavalry charge if you like. It does put you at risk of having a quick end to your military career. But, you know, in the smoke and confusion of battle, people often didn't notice this happening. I mean, Gustavus was killed at the Battle of Lutzen and nobody really noticed that King of Sweden was down. So nobody's going to notice the odd brigadier disappears.
No.
So that's the command and control and the ordinary
units.
unit structure.
Yeah, okay. Now, you mentioned Gustavus Adolphus there, and we will be going into the 30 years
Yes.
war. I mean, it's not a huge jump, is it?
No,
at
not
all?
really. No, there's some few. There'll be some few extra rules for things like Croats and Polish hussars and things like that. But the main infantry and cavalry types are identical as to the English Civil War types, so they need very little change at all.
Good. So yes, you will be able to play 30 years war games with Never Mind the Matchlocks as well.
Yeah.
And anything thereabouts, anything.
Yeah, I take it really anything from the
17th
30 Years War up to Monmouth Rebellion, something like that.
Very good. All right. Well, I shall look forward to beating you again, just
Yeah,
like I have done today.
Indeed, it's a good sign.
Yes. Yes, we've just enjoyed a great game.
This was the ruined church of St Daniel. He must have been looking down fondly on Dan's dice rolling, because it was beyond belief at times.
It was exceptionally good. Yes, so it's always nice to beat the author of any set of rules, especially in your first game.
It's quite nice to lose as the author of a set of rules, because it means I must be doing something right.
Yeah. Yes. Definitely not wrong. Right. Okay. Thanks very much, Andy.
Thank you.
This video has been brought to you by WiPrime, Wargames Illustrated magazine's online members club. View more videos or find out more about WiPrime by following these links.